So we're here to discuss a few more problems that we found regarding the running after script on cancelled and timed out pipelines. I have a few questions. I think the first one is agreeing on how to actually enable the feature. So I see it that we have three options, right? Having the after script run on cancelled and timed out jobs automatically. And then that would be behind the feature flag. Uh, where the feature flag is still to be discussed, if it's be on the runner level or on the Rails level. Another option is option B, is to have the interruptible graceful part. This was the original proposal. Um, and it's a bit more clear, but it's something that the user has to set up on a job level every time, even from even in the default one. And then another option that was discussed, but I don't think anyone really liked it, is the introduce a new finally script or something like that. That will have the default behavior. But looking at the issue and the amount of thumbs up and feedback from the community, option A seems to be what most people prefer and what most people want. Um, uh, and I tend to agree with that. The only problem is how to actually enable it. Uh, should we enable it on a like per job? Should we enable it per project? Should we enable it instance wide, or should we enable it runner level? Um, that is something to be discussed, and I'm not sure what your folks' opinion is on it.
I think it's safer to enable straight away if we jump to step 3 here briefly, the CI build status, if that's supported, then it gives people an out if it's already enabled, because we can document that they can add like a one-line script at the top of their after script that says, if it's cancelled or if it's timed out, just exit, and then they'll keep the previous behavior. So it will still be required for them to do some sort of action to make sure if it's being run and they don't want it to be run on cancelled and timed out, we're at least providing an option.
Okay, so you're saying providing an opt-out, but opting out is still kind of a breaking change, right? I still have to change my code to make it work as it was before.
Yeah, I think feature flagging to begin with, and then allowing and warning on that allows people to enable the feature flag immediately in this release,
okay.
and then modify their script, because otherwise they're not going to enable it. Because if they don't want to run on cancelled or timed out, there's nothing that they can do. They just won't enable the feature flag, and then when 14 rolls around, they'll be stuck. But we'll probably have CI build status by then.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. And if that would be the case, jumping a bit on point 2, if we introduce a new state, which is something that Gregors brings up, and I agree as well, like looking at Aaron's merge request, we're trying to shoehorn successful and cancelled as a status that the runner sends. So if we end up introducing a new state on the Rails side, let's say, I know teardown is misleading. Maybe canceling is the correct word, or shutting down or something like that. Like we introduce this state where it defines the transition between the user pressing the cancelled and the job going to finished state. So we need a new transition phase, right? Right now on the runner, on our merge request, on Aaron's merge request, we're using the update success and canceling status, which is not ideal. So if we introduce this new state, we can have it that it is a feature flag on Rails.
Yeah, so I like the idea of the canceling status. I think it's whether it's tear down, canceling on something else, it doesn't really matter. It's an implementation detail.
It does matter, because like tear down It's
yeah, of course, like it shouldn't be like confusing and misleading. So tear down is indeed not a good choice. But canceling then is similar to cancel, and it's so similar that it can be confusing too. So perhaps there's another option, but this is not important. What I'm thinking about is how to make this backwards compatible, because if we decide to introduce canceling status, it means that when a user clicks cancel button, the job is going to change status to canceling. Then the runner, while sending in trace, will see that this job is in the canceling state, is going to run the after script, and then it's going to send a canceled state to conclude the job, right? So the runner, after the after script is done, tells GitLab that this is canceled. But what do we do to make it backwards compatible with old runners? We will probably need to retain the old behavior and use runner features. And in case of the old behavior, if this is a runner, old runner, we won't be able to use canceling status.
I don't think, yeah, we do need the features from the runner, but if it's a feature flag that it's enabled by Rails, if the user presses the cancel button, right? If the feature flag is turned on, it will send a new status canceling, and the new runners will handle, oh, I understand canceling.
But if it's going to be an alt runner, what happens in that case? Because in alt runners, we never send the canceled state. It does not exist.
Yeah, that's why we need both things, the runner features and this feature flag. And then we can have it that if the feature flag is turned on and the user presses cancelled, it will send the canceling state if the runner feature supports the canceling state.
So does it mean that a build will need to know what version of the runner is actually running this build?
Yeah, you do know that via features, right?
But we do not persist that information anywhere in the build context, okay. I think, in the Rails. Like it's one-time check.
Okay.
So this is something that is like, basically I think that what we are going to do on the runner side is going to be much easier than what we are supposed to do on the Rails side. And that's the reason why I think it might be interesting to explore how we can simplify this. But on the other hand, like we don't have much choice, and the intermediate status is probably required. I was thinking whether we could actually use running with some kind of a flag somewhere to just reduce the amount of, because adding a new status is kind of quite error prone. But yeah.
So so I kind of think that we could move like we could probably somehow not persist runner features if you would really want to, and like be, let's say, like still backward compatible with old runners versus the new runner. I think that there is a way for doing that. I just don't know if it's gonna be clean way to do that if you would not persist runner features, and how we send status. I'm pretty certain after looking at Aran MR on runner that in order to send trace from runner when a job is cancelled, you're gonna have to have a new runner, because there is like legitimately missing code path to support sending trace on this condition that job is cancelled. So what I'm saying, like we could probably support cancelling on old runners without supporting trace being appended in kind of like some transparent way, maybe without persisting runner features. But I'm kind of thinking that maybe persisting runner features as part of the build metadata as a JSON column or something like that could be pretty useful for the future as well, to be fair, for us to use, because I think it's not going to be the first time when we may have slightly different behavior based on the runner version running. But we're going to need Aran MR to actually, probably we're going to need two MRs from Aran, which is like one sending, one actually supporting canceling state as sent from the GitLab, and allowing these trace to be appended and like concluded. And the second one, actually executing after script in the cases when we want this after script executed, it means always. And the third MR probably supporting CI build status or something of sorts. It seems like we have basically like on the runner side, we have three distinct problems to solve, in fact, to support that properly. That kind of built into a bigger solution.
Can you go a bit more into detail about the second MR? Because I'm not sure I understand supporting after script without build trace.
So like we have effectively like three stories that we talk about here today. First story is supporting canceling state, which is a transition state during which you can still send trace. And like, take a look, this is the problem that applies not only to after script, but also to today's execution, like canceling. Cancel is not immediate. Runner can still generate trace before it receives cancel state. So you may still be running script and generating trace that is gonna be lost, basically. So we need to somehow improve the handling of the canceling plus cancel state. And this is like, we need change on the race and we need change on the runner. That runner can discover that race requested canceling, that requested cancel, and your job on the race side is in the canceling state, and we kind of conclude this execution gracefully, sending trace, killing jobs, and kind of like sending this final update to transition from canceling to actual canceled. And to be fair, it's actually pretty good user experience change, because previously people would cancel assuming that this is immediate, which was never immediate. Right now, they kind of know that you click cancel, this is being canceled now, and you actually know when it's actually gonna be canceled by runner. So it's kind of like very good user experience change to have this clear transition that takes into account like runner execution, which is like the first item, like the first story. Second story is like after script. We need to execute after script always. It's completely separate. As we solve canceling problem, then execution of after script gonna be probably significantly simpler, because it's probably changing very small portion of the code path and handling within context of the cancelled and what we do with that. And the first story is like exporting CI build status or something of that sort as part of the after script to give people an option to decide if they want what they were doing in after script to be executed on any of these statuses. Because then like after script becomes pretty useful if you have CI build status, because like let's assume that like as part of the script you perform deploy, and you can now use after script on failure or on cancel to kind of roll back the deploy that maybe not finished because you didn't have time to do it. So I think that these are the three stories that I see here. That we need to maybe, it's not about even like solving the sequentially. Maybe they could be done in the parallel, but these are three distinct stories that kind of give you like the full proper user experience that you may use the after script on the cancelled, but also have the control to dismiss some of the after script execution when you don't want it to happen. And you kind of still have like better user experience of actually understanding where something is actually canceling and it was actually canceled.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I have no objections to that. Like from a runner perspective, yes, those are three merge requests that we can be separate, unless Aaron disagrees in any of them.
No, that makes sense. At the moment, with update succeed with cancel, it would be good to see, excuse me, how that would change by introducing a new state. Because how would that look? Are we still not going to end up shoehorning an updated message with the state?
I think at that point the update message is just update success, right? Because we updated successfully the trace, right? Or am I misunderstanding?
I mean, that's sort of what we had originally before we went with this, right? I was converting the cancelled signal to an updated state. Is that what we'd go back to?
I would say so, because then we have the build status at hand, like we know it's canceling, right? Because the reason we had to introduce update success with cancel is because we didn't we were telling it, oh, update successful, but we didn't know which state we were in, right?
So
that's why we.
So the change isn't to introduce an object that has both of them in, or is it?
I think for me right now, I think that having just a different state would be much simpler, both from a runner level and both from a Rails level, right? Because even Rails can say, hey, this job is canceling. So even if Rails know that the job is canceling, it can do a lot of things like specific timeouts on its end if it wants, like UX improvements on its end and things like that.
I guess I'm still confused what the other state gives us that cancel doesn't for our side. I understand it for the Rails side because canceling and then cancelled, they are two different states. But for runner, it receiving cancelled or cancelling, it doesn't change what we do.
I think it depends. So I have a question. What state is runner sending right now after it cancels the execution? Is that it's as far as I know, it's not reaching craze after the fact, right? In the case of the new feature, it should be probably reaching out to Rails saying that this has been concluded, it's done, right? The new state is canceled. So the difference is that without canceling, runner received the information that the build has been canceled, and then it just wrapped up execution and nothing has been done. But with the new state, at the end of the build, we are going to send a final update to Rails saying that this has been concluded, the build is now cancelled.
So I think what we do today on the Rails side, on the patch and on update, we always send update even on cancel. From what I'm thinking, but what we actually do is that we attach a header, build status or something like that, that returns cancelled, the actual status, even it returns actual status, which is cancelled, and returns 403, I think, which is forbidden, that you cannot perform this operation. What I'm thinking, what we would do, we would return patch, it would return status 200 or 2 or 1. I don't know. It depends what is being executed. So the operation succeeded, but as part of the isBuild status, it would return a status, which is it would be either canceling or cancelled. And I think that according to the current code path, if you would return cancelled with the with the HTTP status of 200, runner would still handle that as today, which is it would upload the build and it would propagate the execution cancel, but it would not append traces. So I think this could be I will have to validate that, but this would be the backward compatible change. But in the new scenario, with the ARAN change, I think we should be returning, as I'm saying, build state cancelled or canceling. I don't know what is better name here. And HTTP status effectively 200, because we still allow during canceling these operations to be executed, so they can actually follow the full code path to perform patch or perform update until the build on the Rails side is in the cancelled state. If it's in the cancelled state, it means it's concluded, and we don't allow any updates from the runner at that point. So Aaron, I don't know if it's answer your question or we talk about something different, but I'm kind of thinking that like we would change the behavior on the race side from the API perspective to, in the canceling state, to return HTTP status to 100 instead of 403. This change connected with the build status that we, from what I saw, have implemented everywhere on the critical path. It means patch trace and update job. We have this condition case is aborted or something. It would be backward compatible with the old runners. They would probably they would properly catch that the job was aborted. But in the new scenario, like you could distinguish that something was like is forbidden to be updated versus you still are in the canceling state. So like the patching succeeded, but GitLab kind of tells you, please cancel me as soon as possible. I'm waiting for you to cancel. Something of that sort.
At the moment, if we run my MR against an existing GitLab installation, what happens is that the build is cancelled, the after script is run on cancelled if the feature flag is enabled, and then GitLab tries to append the trace, and then GitLab returns a permission error saying it's not allowed because the token has expired or been cancelled, the build is no longer running, and then it aborts again. And it tries to run the cancelled function again that doesn't exist now because it's set to nil. So in a way, at the moment, the current merge request always runs after script, regardless of whether it can append a log. GitLab then tells us already whether it supports it. If it's an older installation, it's going to say permission denied. The only problem at the moment is then the Docker containers then immediately removed. So they will cancel the after script effect. So we'd need to solve that. But the current MR seems to be backwards compatible. As soon as GitLab starts saying that append after we were cancelled was successful, then eventually runner will send a failure with the failure reason of cancelled. But we could also change that to just cancelled rather than a failure.
I think that whatever we do, it might not be a good idea to run after script without surfacing traces. I think it might be confusing. Something is going to run and the people will never know that, this has been executed, so on. Yeah, that's the only remark that I have.
Yes, I agree. I think that like we should focus not on executing after script at first, but on properly supporting canceling and appending trace. It's gonna be easier because then like the after script should be very small addition to the runner to actually allow this execution.
That makes sense.
Because like if we solve canceling in the clean way, then like we had some discussion on after script behavior or like sending artifacts or caches. I think like even looking at the options of executing after script unconditionally, it's becoming super simple, really. Then that like we really decide how we want this process to look.
Yeah, the after script change itself is like a 4-line change, right? Just updating the context. That's the status. That is the tricky part. Just one thing that we need to keep in mind as well, this canceling state, right? Like in the issue itself, like the title is for timed out, for canceled jobs and timed out jobs as well. So would canceling be a good, would this idea would still be reflected as a good implementation for timed out jobs? So for example, if this job timed out, the timeout happens on the runner, right? Is it okay that the runner sends the canceling status as well? So then it's telling Rails, hey, this job is being canceled. I'm gonna run my own stuff, and then I'll tell you later on when the job is canceled / finished.
So I always assume that we have distinction between two states, like cancel, which is like user done operation, failure or success, which is like system done behavior or like system done result. So can you consider timeout to be user operation? That's something that failed from the because of the user operation. I'm kind of thinking that like runner timeout should stay as is. Like it sends value, it sends job failed with the value reason of like timeout, because it's not user operation that was done. It's not like that someone that go click a button and decided I want to cancel this job. It's rather like system escape their limits.
So what status should we see? Like, let's imagine a scenario when a user clicks cancel button, we are transitioning to canceling, we start running after script and the timeout hits during the after script execution. So is that job succeeded or failed in that case?
It's still cancel. Like what was the first? It was user intent of canceling.
Yeah, but how do we, so, okay, so it's going to be canceled, but then in the build log, we are going to write that after script has been terminated by a timeout. So that's the only way, anyway, how we surface errors in the after script in the build log. We do not have a status of the after script.
It's still cancel. It was first.
Yeah, okay, it makes sense. But
we
are going to see that information in the build log, right? That this has
yes, like and like it's not harmful really. Like that, like it's not harmful that like you executed after script and you see that your after script was so complex, so long that you like escaped this 5-minute timeout that I think we have hard coded today. So it's like it's actually useful for people to see. We executed after script on cancel, but sorry, like we failed. I think like what I'm saying is like if you click cancel button, it transitions into canceling, and the only other state the canceling can transition to is canceled, regardless of what regardless of what runner says, really, because like this was the first really. I mean, this was the first like winning status change.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So for timeouts, are we still going to be running after script?
If the timeout happens when we are running the after script, we should terminate the after script.
But for the main job, if the main job times out, not in the 5 minutes for after script, we're still running after script.
In my opinion, we shouldn't.
Yeah, same as well here. Like it does not seem to make sense, but users seem to want to have, like, looking at the issue title, looking at the issue description, looking at the comments, users seem want to have after script run on timeout as well.
What users want is not important. It's important what they need, and they need reliable like timeouts that are going to protect them from making mistakes.
I fully agree with that, and that is something that maybe we can push to a new issue, a new discussion.
I mean, I imagine it's going to be asked for immediately, because if anyone's got a cleanup script in their after script, if a build times out and that doesn't run, it's going to ruin the rest of their builds. Like if they're using the local executor on Windows and they're doing a bunch of weird state changes that need to be cleaned up at the end, which happens, I've had to do it before, the build is then going to not run. But you could argue that they could put that at in the before script section.
Yeah,
maybe.
In that case, they should actually either refine their script so it doesn't run for such a long time, or tune timeouts. Timeout is there to protect users and service from disruptions, problems. Like it's a different mechanism, work on a different level. So in my opinion, timeout should be final and we should not run anything after the timeout.
I don't know either, but like maybe we can solve cancel for now, and like then ask people if they want timeout as well. Like if we have that figured out, it's gonna be pretty well and easy chance for us to also run on the timeout. The problem with the timeout is like, do we treat that as a security feature that like Bitcoin miner, people are Bitcoin mining, could they like use these other 5 minutes for the on the after script?
I think it's clear that we treat that as a security feature because we have different levels of timeout defined on the runner, on the project, on the instance level, and we enforce these timeouts, and then we use that on GitLab.com to actually secure infrastructure from malicious usage. So in my opinion, it's a security feature.
So I think like my opinion right now, I think that maybe we should not run on the timeout, but maybe we finally implement graceful kill of the job containers. This would be probably something significantly better that would allow people to still have some way to clean up their resources on the timeout, and it may be a better idea.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, and that is something that me and Aaron was working on as well. Graceful shutdowns for the Docker executor. We already implemented it in the shell executor now. So yeah, that is one option we can tell the user, like, hey, listen to this sick term signal, and you'll do your cleanup when you want to, kind of thing. So to make sure that because we're way over time, to make sure that we all agree on an implementation as runner will start accepting a new status called canceling, for example, and that can change at any time. When the runner sees that the job is in canceling state, it will stop whatever it's doing. It will move to starting updating the trace and updating the job to a new state called canceled when everything is done. And then the runner will start executing the after script in a second merge request when the job is in a state called canceling. And then the third step would be the runner will set the CI build status. I would preferably call it CI job status because we're trying to move away from the terminology build, but that's like really an implementation detail there. And then Rails will just accept the new statuses, and runner will send a feature, one of the features called, I don't know, cancelable or something like that. Does that make sense?
Just to make sure I'm on the same page. So the new canceling state that we receive, that will be for newer GitLab installations, whereas for older ones, we'd still receive cancelled.
I think it would be behind the feature flag still. That is something that the Rails team would need to decide. I fully suggest having a feature flag. So right now, if the feature flag is turned off, it will still send the canceled state. So the runner will do what it's doing right now. But if the feature flag is turned on, it will send the canceling one, and runner will go through the.
So if the feature flag isn't enabled, runner will never receive cancelled. It will only ever receive cancelling. And if it's off, it'll receive cancelled and not cancelling.
Okay. Yeah. Does that make sense? Because that would prevent, preserve the current behavior we have if it's turned off.
I'm kind of thinking that maybe I think you would have to look at the code and play with different ideas. What would make it like the most backward compatible, maybe? So I don't know the answer. I think like there is we have two ways to handle that cleanly. That is backward compatible with all the runners, and is Rails can be supporting workflows. So I don't know the answer. We would have to play with different ideas. Yeah, but from what I recall, it seems fully doable to make it in very clean way without a lot of effort to make it compatible.
And I assume that we're developing this concurrently rather than runner having all this first and then Rails second.
I mean, technically we can do it concurrently because we have to, they have to be compatible with one another, right? So
yeah, I'm really worried that we'll end up putting all of this in runner, and then for some reason on the Rails side, there's some specific concern about sending a specific state like cancelling, and then we have to go back to runner and update it. Because really, if we put this code in runner and release it, it does nothing until the Rails side is also complete.
Yeah, and I don't think that is an issue, right? I mean, for now, it seems like we all agreed that we need to use the job statuses to coordinate everything. So if we just stick with that, with job statuses to coordinate everything, the naming would be just a simple one-line change if we really want to change the name from canceling to something else, right?
Yeah, I just wonder if it's just going to come down to naming, because if there's some other complexity there, then it's going to be harder.
99% it would be, because naming is really hard. But
maybe so. I don't know. Like there is some unknowns about how to model that. Maybe I'm gonna spend some time on some POC on the Rails side, how this canceling could behave. So Aaron, like if we would get like some POC of mine, you would have like the complete full workflow that you could test against your installation, and we would just follow then this design, basically.
Yeah, that'd be really handy, especially then because I can probably model tests off of that behavior that we know is going to be in GitLab Runner. Because if it turns out it's not just a naming concern, it's also like we're going to have status codes also directing the flow. If I write tests now, they're not going to be relevant by the end of the GitLab implementation.
I mean, like if you would have the POC, then like you could also ensure that like old runner is compatible or the new runner is compatible with older GitLab version and things like that, which is, I think, quite important.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Awesome. I'll update the issue in a comment later today with everything that we discussed. And yeah, we'll go ahead talking about it.
In the doc, I wrote at the bottom on the tracks that like we discussed and like you kind of rephrased. Can you check if this is accurate?
Implement canceling state, yeah. I updated point B to execute after script from runner on canceling instead of canceling. Just so, yeah. I think that makes sense. Perfect.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you.
Bye.
See you. Bye.